This policy was never included in Labour's manifesto. Voters never had a chance to approve it. Yet now the party seems to be quietly retreating from it. Matt Goodwin breaks down why this digital ID plan reveals a much deeper insight into how this government really operates.
Just to provide some more context for this, what's actually breaking, so the government, remember, previously said digital ID would be mandatory for right-to-work checks from the year 2029. This could now be introduced as optional. Now, one Labour MP told the Politics Home website this evening, it is hard to find a backbench Labour MP who will advocate for mandatory compulsory digital ID in public or a minister who will defend it in private. And that, in essence, says everything you need to know. Labour came into this, remember, this was never in Labour's manifesto. They just kind of pulled it out of the hat and said, well, we're going to, like typical Labour politics, we're going to impose this measure on everybody else. Despite never even putting it in the manifesto. Hang on, Steve. Despite never even putting it in the manifesto, they looked at the polling and thought, oh, actually, this isn't as clear-cut. Looks like lots of people don't like this. Then everyone hit social media from Nigel Farage onwards saying, well, I'm not going to comply with this. And by the way, I also said that. And I think they then saw this is just going to be mass civil resistance to an authoritarian regime that nobody ever voted for to begin with.
It was a measure that was considered in the context of illegal working. That's what it was looked at.
If you're breaking into the country illegally and you're already in the black economy, you're not going to get caught by a digital ID check.
It was a measure that was looked at in the context of illegal working.
Was it in the manifesto?
No, it wasn't.
Right, that's not how we do democracy in this country.
Well,
we put the things in front of the people and then they vote for that. What we don't do is we don't run off to the Blairite Institute, right, the little Tony Blair's Institute, and we say, Tony, without any democratic mandate, what can we put on top of the British people?
That if governments only put forward what was in their manifesto, we'd have very little government. Maybe it would be a good thing.
13 U-turns. I tell you what, though, this government is shambolic, it is inconsistent, it is collapsing in the polls. I think this government will not get to the end of this year. We need a general election now. We need Keir Starmer out of number 10.
Now the Conservative Party, Mark II, if they take on any more Conservative refugees, there won't be a Reform Party.
It looks ridiculous to the country, to the voters, to the electorate. This whole show looks ridiculous. Starmer, remember, we were told, he'd be the adult in the room. We'd be back to responsible, stable leadership. 13 U-turns. They've barely been in office for a little over, 14, 15 months. It's a complete
one man's
sham.
U-turn is another man's considered change of opinion.
I know, but let me ask you honestly, do you not feel a little bit embarrassed by the way that the current government is performing?
No, I don't. I think all governments have... Honestly, I don't sense that at all. I have seen just as many things happen in governments of all shades in the past. I don't see that at all. I see a government that inherited a torrid state of affairs from its predecessors and has done its level best in some very difficult circumstances to weave a path. Some of its communications have been really poor, and I'd be the first to acknowledge that. But I don't actually criticise them for having a change of mind if they've realised that something isn't worth the candle.
But this is what I don't understand, and I'm not a politician, so I shall bow down to your experience. But when you're saying, you know what, they've changed their mind because now they've realised that it's not worth the candle or whatever you said, my pushback to that would be, why didn't you realise that in advance? Because you must have known that some of these things were not going to go down well, that were not going to be easy to achieve, that were the wrong priorities and all the rest of it. You look weak, you look shambolic, you look weak, you look unprepared, you look disorganised, and you look like you're failing the country that you're supposed to be governing properly.
Well, the penalty of being part of a democratic structure is that different currents run and different ideas emerge. Obviously, in a dictatorship, you don't have this problem.
It don't wash with me saying that all of this was all about trying to clamp down on illegal working, because already migrants need like a share code and stuff like that. So it just, no. Does it wash with you?
No, it doesn't. What this government has been all about from day one has been authoritarian progressivism. And what I mean by that is a government that instinctively reaches whenever there's a problem, whenever there's a challenge, to try and shut down and narrow the public square, to try and keep people under surveillance, to try and manage democracy rather than to let democracy breathe. We saw it after Southport. We've seen it with the anti-Muslim or Islamophobia definition. We've seen it with the expansion of non-crime hate incidents, which even the police have now said are ridiculous. We've seen it with Keir Starmer branding everybody far right. We've seen it with the government and the police throwing into prison pensioners for sharing their views on social media. And we've seen it in the push for digital ID. This is classic authoritarian progressivism. They cannot win the arguments in the country. They cannot bring the people over to their side of the debate. So they try and control the people. They try and manage the people, except they mess with the wrong people. These are the islands, remember, that created liberty. The history of England is the history of liberty. That's what Macaulay said. And the British people and the English people are never going to stand for and tolerate this kind of authoritarianism.
This clip is important because it shows a government being forced to pause. Not because it suddenly discovered humility, but because it realised it had moved too quickly, too far, without asking for approval. The digital ID plan was never part of an election debate. Voters were never given a choice. It was never tested in public discussion. Instead, it appeared out of nowhere, presented as common sense, justified by concerns over illegal working, and quietly pushed forward as if it were unavoidable. That is not how a healthy democracy should work. Matt Goodwin is right to highlight this. The moment public pushback emerged, from polls, social media, and figures like Nigel Farage openly refusing to comply, the government changed course almost instantly. Suddenly, the policy became optional. Suddenly, even ministers couldn't defend it, not even behind closed doors. Suddenly, backbench MPs wanted to distance themselves. That says it all. This policy was never built on public consent. It was built on an assumption. The belief that people would accept surveillance if it was presented as efficiency. When that assumption failed, the confidence behind the policy crumbled. What makes this clip so striking is Goodwin's description of authoritarian progressivism. That term hits home because it captures a pattern we've seen over and over. Whenever there's a social issue, the instinct isn't to persuade or debate. It's to exert control. Shrink freedoms, expand regulations, monitor behaviour, manage speech, and label dissent as dangerous. We've seen it before, after Southport, with the expansion of non-crime hate incidents, pensioners arrested for social media posts, and vague labels like far-right applied so broadly they become tools to silence disagreement. And now we see it again with digital ID. The Labour minister's argument that governments change their minds all the time completely misses the point. This isn't about reconsidering policy after proper consultation. It's about introducing sweeping measures without public consent, and then backing down only when people refuse to go along. That isn't responsiveness. That's a miscalculation. The most telling moment in the clip comes when the minister basically shrugs and says, "This is democracy. Different currents emerge." But Goodwin's reply hits harder. If these ideas were going to face pushback, why weren't they tested honestly before being rolled out? The truth is, resistance wasn't expected. Compliance was.